Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our new episode of Community Connection of the Lehigh Valley. I am Victoria Alursha, licensed professional counselor, and hopefully, if you've seen our videos before, you remember my co-host. Mark, introduce yourself.
Hi, Vicky. Yeah, it's been a while, but good to be back. Mark Kenny, I am the program director for the Masters in Clinical and Counseling Psychology program at DeSales University and Chestnut Hill College. So I'm really pleased to be here and participate. And before we jump into our questions with our guest, we'd like her to introduce herself to the
Yeah,
community, and then we'll get into some dialogue.
great. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Kara Wasser. I'm the founder and CEO of Ohanalink Technologies. We're a digital platform technology company, and we are very excited to be able to utilize our technology skills and expertise in the domestic violence space, which I'll talk a lot more about here today.
Thank you so much. This is absolutely something that is needed in our community, and we can't wait to hear more about it. So let's just start off with, what is Ohanalink Purple?
Yeah, so Ohanalink Purple is a digital service delivery platform. And so essentially taking all of the tools that you guys use to provide services to the victims and survivors that you serve, and making them digitally accessible to those users. And so the big component of that, though, is the safety, security, and privacy around the platform that enables you to do that. So we've, thinking through this solution, we're looking at some of the challenges that you all were having in providing the services. So, full transparency, I'm not a provider, but we do provide the technology that enables agencies and providers to do the work that you do safely and securely. And so that's where we fit into this equation. And then I can get into some of the background of how we landed in this space here when ready.
Sure.
Mhm. So, continue to elaborate with that in terms of how come
Yeah.
it's important around this issue of digital security and safety for violence providers and the community that they serve.
Yeah, so in the very early days of COVID, we were approached by our local domestic violence agency here in Mercer County, Pennsylvania. We had launched a solution out into the space, into the healthcare space that connected family and friends safely, securely, and privately. And so what we learned, though, after we were approached by the local domestic violence agency, we learned that some of the challenges that they were having in connecting with victims and survivors safely and securely. And so now victims are at home with their abusers, sometimes 24/7 because people are working from home. And they needed a safer way to be able to connect and communicate without having to worry about messages being intercepted or, are they actually texting with the victim survivor or, are they being intercepted? So there was some trust in utilizing technology or lack of trust, rather, that we really needed to address. So that's what we've done.
Safety is crucial. I mean, I
Wonderful.
think in any situation, but specifically domestic violence. So I always love to hear the backstory of how things kind of come to fruition. So if
Mhm.
you could share, like, how did you come up with this idea?
Yeah, so like I said, working in the healthcare space with the privacy security at the forefront, we ended up working with a group of 7 agencies in Western Pennsylvania. So it wasn't, I take no credit for the features and functionality that you see today within Ohanalink Purple's system, but really immersing ourselves as a tech company. My sister's a survivor, so it's a personal mission for me. So when they came to us and offered us this opportunity to work with them, it was really a gift. And so to be able to give back in that space and something that affected my family personally. And so, we started working together, talking about the challenges, you know, sending a message and having it be intercepted not only puts the victim and survivor at risk, but also that advocate that is trying to provide the services. And so those were some of the aha moments that we had in, like, how can we bridge this gap of not only helping victims and survivors get access to very important information, but also protecting the advocates that are providing the services services. And so that was really what we spent a lot of our time, about 9 months, working with this coalition to really uncover some of the challenges. And so what we did was we came up with several communication channels within the system, allowing them to nudge their clients discreetly. So if an abuser is monitoring their device, it looks like something else, or looks like something coming from a random app that they have on their device. And so we were able to kind of work with some of the technology to streamline a lot of those challenges that we learned about.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, it sounds wonderful, because that's, the communication is so critical piece. And so it sounds like this was really a collaborative effort that came up with, but in a real trial and error, to come up with this system over time.
Yeah, it really was collaborative. And then, beyond the communication, which was ultimately what they came to us for, we ended up taking it one step further, and we're continuing to take it 10 steps further every time we circle back. So, like, for example, the communication was our first goal. How can we get you to safely communicate and connect? And then we started looking at what are the other things that we can include in the system that streamline operations for service providers. And so, we can upload all your handouts, brochures, pamphlets, things that you typically hand to your clients. They would have safe digital access to, without any history, trace, or cookies being left on their devices when they are accessing those tools. And so really creating this single source of truth, this toolkit for victims and survivors to get the services they need from providers like counselors or domestic violence agencies, but also, at the same time, looking at those operational efficiencies or inefficiencies that are occurring within an organization. Turnover is high. The demand is high. So how can we continue to utilize technology to respond to the increasing demand while working with the same resources that you have today? And so technology really is the answer for that. And I'll stop talking in a second, but some of the other features that we've been working on are the document signing. That's a very important component of being able to the operational efficiency side of things. We're in rural Pennsylvania, so having to drive to meet a survivor to just get one little piece of paper signed so that they can engage with them, and us being able to remove that barrier is something that we've moved forward with as well. So when I talk about this system, it's not just texting, it's not just chatting, it's really enabling a relationship with that victim and survivor, and you to execute on the tools and resources that you all provide.
I think you already touched base on some of this, but like, what are some of the features, for the advocates and for the victims? Because it sounds like it's to help everyone really involved in these situations.
Yeah, so some of the very early features that we focused on were, removing the need for a victim or survivor to have a phone number, email address, or something that's potentially interceptable or discoverable as their point of contact. So what we did is we created a way for an agency or, advocate or someone that's working with this victim or survivor to create a unique ID code that gives them access to the system. So that was number one. How can we remove that? So now that barrier of them needing to have an active data plan or an email address to be able to communicate is gone. And so they can pick up any device, any mobile device, a tablet, their child's tablet, anything that's Wi-Fi enabled, and get connected to you anytime. So that was one of the really big hurdles that we overcame very early on. Second was disguised access points. So there's a lot of apps out there in this space for that look like a weather app, or they look like a calculator, or those kinds of tools. And sometimes it's discoverable, whether when you first download it, it tells you what it is, or if you're digging deep enough, you can actually discover what it is. Our disguised access point is a fully functioning tool where even if an abuser finds it on their device, they can go on the victim's device, they can go download it, they can utilize it, and they would never know that actually behind that is the access point to services. And so we've disguised it in a way that there's a website that goes with the access point. I obviously won't tell you what it is today here publicly, but it's fully accessible. So if an abuser does discover it, it does fully function and look like something else. So that was number two, of course, making sure that access was safe and secure. And then we started looking at the inside features, which I briefly talked about. The messaging channels, there's two of them in there. The one allows the advocates to send a nudge that will then indicate to the victim and survivor that they have something to see when it's safe for them to see it. However, you can send that message at any time. You don't have to wait for that safe window or to worry about it being intercepted. And when that wrapper is unlocked, they'll have little red dots that indicate where they need to go to see those messages. And then there's a chat channel in there too that just has silent notifications so that you can, chat back and forth, but it's not leaving any history or trace on their devices. And then, we have the document signing. We have the resource sections, which is like the handouts, pamphlets, brochures, everything digitized. Handbooks are able to be in there as well. And then another really, really great feature that we have is our directory. And so we work with each agency individually on who do you typically refer your clients to for different categories of service. Who are your allies? Are you handing your clients business cards for these individuals or pieces of paper or pamphlets? Reducing all of that down to digital. And then we are actually in the process of rolling out the voice over IP associated with that. And what that means is your client can go into the directory, look through your list of allies for these different categories of services, click on that phone number underneath the wrapper, and it will not leave a history on their call log or on their phone bill. So really looking at all of those tools that are needed to enable a victim to plan for safety and for you all, more importantly, to be able to do your jobs to help them.
That's amazing. I kept on waiting for you to pause so I can jump in and say how amazing. I mean, so no, don't apologize. So like I can't even wrap my head around like how someone even starts going about all those components. That's fantastic.
Thank you. And we're not done. We're looking at the in-app video components. That's on our roadmap as well, so that you can have your in-app video conferencing. You can run groups, support groups through the system. So really looking at all of those things to do in person and how can we bring them digital safely.
Yes. Yeah. And then you mentioned the fact that you work with rural counties and the distance. And so this really, that can sometimes be a major barrier that you're really breaking. Even what you just shared in terms of even services being provided is make your breakthrough.
Yeah, and some of the that actually came about with some of the transportation issues, not only in rural communities, but in the bigger cities that do have public transit, and that was unavailable during COVID. So that was really one of the challenges that it's not just for the rural communities; it really is for everybody, but also meeting the victims where they are, which is in their mobile devices. And that's so important, giving them access. I know my sister, for example, was hesitant to go to a shelter, was hesitant to seek help. She was a professional. Was an accountant, and there was this taboo with actually going to a shelter and what that meant. Thank God she finally did. But had services been available digitally, that comfort level with, this generation, also breaks down some of the barriers, I believe.
Yeah. So what has been the response from the agencies to Ohanalink Purple?
Yeah, it's kind of two-sided. Well, first of all, when we show them the tool, everyone, is like, I need that. And so some of the barriers, though, which I want to be transparent about, are digital service delivery is new. And so getting it's change, and change is hard, or often resisted, rather, not necessarily hard, but resisted. And so but the response has been amazing because we've made the tool so intuitive that once they actually, we do an hour and a half usually, like onboarding training to walk them through everything. and then they get really comfortable with it because they realize that it's really intuitive. So initially there's like some fear to dive in head first, and how do I integrate this into my my workflow, which we're working on creating really great support tools for that as well. But once they dig in, you know, they realize it's really intuitive. The individuals we worked with to build this solution were not tech-enabled people. I love them all, but they use their phones to call people, which is, you know, not something that a lot of the the other generations do. So,
Right.
but yeah, so it was a little bit of a learning curve just diving in. But once we get through that barrier, everyone just runs with it. So.
And that's what you need help people do, is kind of work through that and just be
Yeah,
comfortable with the technology.
that's exactly right. That implementation side of things is so important. We're actually building a whole team of people to help implement in the agencies so that we can, you know, really be hands-on with those that are utilizing it. So we really become your partners as you're working through that implementation process. So we're really grateful to be able to help in that way.
That's great.
Now, one of the barriers that sometimes is faced, actually, I think faced a lot, is always the funding component, right? You know, so if anyone wants to be involved, whether it's an
Yeah.
agency or an individual, like how does funding come into play with using this tool?
Yeah, so our pricing is pretty simple, but related to the funding, we really haven't had too many funding barriers other than the fact that agencies historically haven't had to budget for technology. So there's like this delay in them needing to at least or fit that into their next budget cycle, or to look for a grant or, you know, something like that. I'm not the expert on finding funding. However, what I can tell you is that some of the agencies we've worked with have been able to get grants from their community foundations and other foundations in the area to implement technology because it is brand new. And then, you know, that being a small barrier, actually more of a time delay barrier rather than actually the finance part of it, is that we are also working with some corporate partners to help bring awareness to the fact that agencies need technology so badly. And large corporations also want to make an impact in this space. And so we're doing our work on our side to educate, you know, our corporate partners or potential corporate partners in that space.
As you're speaking too, I'm wondering at the state level if there needs to be some education about this also. Is this something relatively new that maybe our public officials in Harrisburg are not even attuned to, you know, what is happening in the western part of the state?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. We've talked to several state level officials along the way, but I think that advocates or executive directors or coalitions actually being the voice there, we can provide the tools. We actually have a community toolkit that we provide with all of our to all of our clients that gives you the words to use to be able to talk about this publicly, because there are some fine lines, you know, around exactly what that disguised access point is and things. So people are hesitant to be like, do I talk about that or not? So we put a toolkit together that will enable advocates and executive directors and coalitions to be able to go and have those conversations. We're having them too, but you know, there's not as much you know, we're a for-profit company and they see us for that. They're like, oh, they just want sales. That's not it. So we're really banding together with the coalition. That's who we reach out to first before we go down to the agency level, because that buy-in is really important. But also, you know, relying on them to kind of do that work as well, which they're already doing, you know, and having
right. It just seems it's one of these issues where you were talking about, you know, potential corporate partners, and it just seems like an issue that brings in many partners, because it is an issue that it affects communities at so many levels that you want to bring in as many partners as you could, and that was important for us to hear, that you do give the advocacy language for the agencies so that they can really represent this. information. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're actually dedicating an employee to that component of education. We have one that's sort of like a hybrid doing that, but we realize the importance of the education in not only just at the corporate decision levels and the state levels, but in communities. OBGYNs, counselors, barbers who are victims allowed to go see that we can educate about digital access to services. So I know in my sister's case, she was allowed to go see her counselor and she was allowed to get a haircut. So those are some of the things that we think about as far as who we're educating.
Yeah, yes. And being a director of a counseling program, there's so much information, but there's so much going on that these kind of communications are important for us then to bring that to our students and even through our alumni networking to alert people. So I think it's a powerful tool. So along those lines, how can other agencies listening, particularly here, we're talking to the Lehigh Valley folks over here in Bethlehem and Allentown and Easton, how can they learn more about Ohanalink Purple?
So you can go to ohanalink.com/purple. And then you'll see some intro videos there. There's some really great input from some of the advocates that we worked with initially, and also our contact information so that you can book a demo for your organization.
Okay. What about our community members themselves? How can that resource, but is there anything in particular that they should, on an individual level, might be different?
Yeah, so from an individual level, that's the same place. Ohanalink.com/purple is really the community information that we put out there. A lot of the information that we share within the organizations is confidential around how the solution actually gets into the hands of survivors and victims. But it's also very important for victims and survivors to know that digital technology is an option. Because it will bring a certain comfort level. So reaching out to your local domestic violence agency or counselor or shelter and asking for it. Because again, there's never been something like this before. And so when people start asking for it and the demand is there, then I think it will be important that agencies kind of go that way. I know there's a lot of technology being utilized in these spaces, text messaging and WhatsApp is being used and all of that. But really, this takes it to that next level of safety and security and privacy that's never been done before.
Are you
That's the
familiar?
groundbreaking difference.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Sorry for the technology glitch before. Are you aware if there's any local agencies in the Lehigh Valley that is already utilizing Ohanalink Purple?
Yeah, I'm not sure about Lehigh Valley. I don't have the map in my head, but
Okay.
I know that we have nearly 20 agencies in Pennsylvania, all throughout the state. So, yeah, all Eastern and Western Pennsylvania. So.
Well, we are excited to pass this along to the Lehigh Valley. This is fantastic.
Awesome.
Is there anything else specific that you think would be important for our viewers to know?
I think I've covered pretty much everything, but again, we do get compared a lot to the tools that are already being used out there. I actually met with an agency yesterday that said, so is this like a WhatsApp? And WhatsApp is encrypted and it's a text messaging system. So we're not WhatsApp. We really are a digital service delivery system. We enable agencies to deliver services beginning to end digitally. And so that's really the differentiator here is in when we're being compared to other tools. And so I think that's just the important thing to drive home is that there are other tools out there like text messaging apps and video conferencing apps and so on. But this really is all encompassing, enables you to streamline your service delivery digitally. You don't need individual cell phone plans for all of the advocates within your organization. Everything is Wi-Fi enabled. And so it really does just bring everything together.
That's fantastic. And so if any of our viewers or we will be sending out this recording to all of our contacts in the Lehigh Valley. What would be the best way for someone to reach out to, I don't know, you directly or just
Yeah.
Ohanalink?
Yeah, so they can reach out to me. My email is kw at ohanalink.tech, TECH.
Okay.
And then I can redirect them to the appropriate person. But
Okay. Fantastic. This has been wonderful. I love all the information that you shared. Mark, any other thoughts or questions on your end before we end for today?
No, I just like in your conclusion that this is a comprehensive, so it's more than what maybe some agencies are using, and it really is a partnership with that agency to provide access to all individuals,
exactly,
and for their service. And I think that's such an important thing to mention to our community members. Yeah. So thank you for coming up and putting this all together and sharing with us today.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And thank your team. It sounds like they've been working very hard at making this a wonderful tool for our community. And thank you to our listeners. Please reach out if you want to learn more. And we wish you well. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.